Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 43rd episode of Slime Time, an official Dragon Quest Dragon's Den podcast. This is Liamland.
And this is the delightful, the dangerous, and always delicious Dwaine.
That changes every time.
What are we getting ourselves into here? God.
Very exciting episode we have planned for you today. We have two guests who not only founded the translation company AltJapan, have written numerous books on the worldwide influence of Japanese culture, but also worked on the localizations for Dragon Warrior 7 for PlayStation and Dragon Quest 8 for PlayStation 2. It is an honor to welcome to the podcast Hiroko Yoda and Matt Alt.
Thank
Hello,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get into some of the questions surrounding the Dragon Quest localizations, but first let's get to know our guests. So how did it all start for you? What first sparked your interest in getting into game translation?
Well, I had always been, I'm not what you consider a hardcore gamer, but I grew up in the 80s, when the NES first came out, and I was there for the console wars. This makes me sound like a veteran of some kind of conflict. But, so I played a lot of games growing up as a kid, and I had an interest in Japan. So the idea of working in, basically, if you were growing up in the 80s or 90s and you were a console gamer, the idea of wanting to work in the field of console games meant you'd be working with Japanese games for the most part. I mean, of course, there were, American and foreign and European companies making games for it, but, I'd always thought it was kind of a cool idea. But it didn't actually come to fruition until way after I graduated from college and was working as a translator for the government, actually, at the Patent and Trademark Office. And an old friend of mine is like, who was a translator in Japan at the time, is like, my hands are full, I can't deal with this. Do you want to take this project? And it turned out to be Silhouette Mirage, the video game Silhouette Mirage for the Saturn, I believe. And it was being localized by Working Designs. And so he passed us off to Working Designs. And I quickly realized I was working full-time for the government. And also it was really quite difficult to localize back then because we just got these, they would just dump the game code on you and you'd have to hunt through for the text. And it was really tough to tell what was going on.
And no visual.
No visual at all. And so I was like, God, Hiroko, who we were dating at the time, Hiroko was getting her grad degree?
Yeah, I was a student. I was busy to study.
Yes.
Did all the research paper and everything at the graduate program.
At American
University. And then one day it's like, Hiroko, I don't think I can do this. Let's just do it. And then we went to the pizza place.
Yeah, we were actually, this is so early on. So this has to be like 97, 8-ish?
That was like a couple of years after the internet.
Yeah, I mean, basically.
That's so true. Yeah.
Well, I definitely remember what Hiroko was talking. Like, I would print out the code on like that sprocket paper. You know what I'm talking about? Like the dot matrix.
20 pages or something like that.
And like, we take these stacks of paper to the local pizza place because none of us had like a home office at the time. And while we eat pizza and like drink beer, we would mark up the document with like
just try to mark up the Japanese.
Well, we would write the translation in the margins of that paper, and then I would go back in and enter them into the, like, we were working like in text editor. It wasn't even, it wasn't even, we just, like Working Designs would just dump this is just how it worked back then. This isn't any kind of like slight on Working Designs. They would just dump the code on you, and you'd have to go in and actually inject the translations into the code where it was and then send it back to them.
Oh man.
Yeah. And then that led to Working Designs hiring us to do Lunar.
Yeah, Lunar.
Silver Star Story, which was, I know. I mean, I was a Lunar, like I loved Lunar on the, I don't know, what was the first incarnation of that came out in America? Was it
Sega CD maybe?
Yeah, it was Sega CD. Yeah, so I had played that. I remember my sister and I played it and really loved it as teenagers. And so it was really like, to me, that was like, wow, I'm getting to work on Lunar. But Hiroko wasn't really like a hardcore gamer or anything.
No, actually, my parents, my parents had been anti-game and manga, and so I wasn't really interested in much. And so it worked out so well between us because if you were just diehard gamer, that probably just unbalanced or not to be interested in it at all. On the other hand, but that wouldn't work out either. So it was actually a good thing, and in East West and
Yeah, no,
men and women.
well, we realized through those projects that we like worked really well together as a team, and we compensated for each other's weaknesses. Hiroko's obviously fluent in Japanese. I'm
And then also that time, because of the internet started, became available in the public. So the concept of the home office
yes,
was
collaborating,
cutting edge. And then it's like, hey, well, maybe
or
we can,
remote work.
yeah, remote work, and
Mhm.
we can do that because before the internet was available, it just no way to do
You
that
had to be in house.
in house.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
So it was kind of a cutting edge thing.
yeah, and so basically it was lowering the hurdle to run the company. And then even though I was a full-time student, and then you were a full-time worker for government, and and then yeah. So basically, we worked really hard.
Yeah, it was at nights and weekends. It was pretty rough for a while there because we had to make deadlines and things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's how it started.
That's how I started it. And
Yeah,
then
so, yeah.
and then but I knew that if Matt wanted to get a job in Japanese company at the time, I knew he would probably get the job. But then, I knew that would be the same thing. He was working for government, and the government turned into another company, and I knew he wasn't interested in that. So we worked hard. That was really hard. We worked hard and then build up the clients so that we could support, so that they could support both of us.
Yeah, full time.
To full time, and then we actually found a company in America.
Yeah.
AltJapan Inc. But then we realized that all the clients are basically Tokyo, and then we were in Washington D.C. and then we have the time difference, and and then of course it's a business world. We have to compete, and so we just closed down AltJapan Inc. Moved to Tokyo, and they said.
Well, there was a tipping point. There was a tipping point in there where we realized we'd have to turn down really lucrative work from game clients or game. At the time, we were mainly working through agencies. Translation agencies. We'd have to turn down really lucrative projects if I didn't stop working for the government. So that was the kind of tipping point where around 2001, we're just like, you know what, I'm going to quit the government. Let's do this full time. So that's the story there. But we're like dominating your podcast here. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
not at all.
Actually, you guys answered the next three questions we had all by yourselves. So thank you. That's awesome.
So, yes. So one of those clients was a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Blaustein, which is going to lead directly into, I suspect, another one of your questions, which is how did we get involved in Dragon Quest?
Yes.
And
So if for those who don't know, he's been behind some of the classic PlayStation localizations. He did Metal Gear Solid. He did Symphony of the Night, and he's done. And that's just two. He's got this giant library of games that he's done. Really a pioneer in that field. So how did you come to work? A guy who was behind so much stuff.
Yeah, no, it was great. But after Hiroko and I did Silhouette Mirage and Lunar Silver Star Story, we realized, wow, this is actually a kind of interesting business to be in. And at the time, I think we should be really clear, it was a wide open field. The word localization wasn't even widely used. We're talking in the late 90s, very late 90s, 99-ish. And you could probably count the number of full-time Japanese to English game localizers on both hands on the planet. There were just so few people specializing in this. And game companies, there wasn't a concept at most game companies of having a localization team or a specialized localization department. Squaresoft was one of the first to realize they needed that, but they were rare. Most game companies didn't realize that, and they would just kind of outsource their games to translation agencies who would then just randomly find people who were translators who didn't necessarily have any game background. So in the 90s, in the late 90s, if you could say that you had any kind of experience at all translating games, you were an instant shoe-in to get on all sorts of really high profile. Now they're looking like high profile projects. At the time, this was a kind of super niche sort of field to be in. But the how we met Jeremy was, and this is really going to date me. What were you going to say?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think we found him on Usenet. I think he does the audience know what Usenet is?
Yes, that's going way back the news groups.
Yes, this is pre-web, internet as we know it today. People interacted through these things called news groups. They were basically bulletin board systems. It was actually kind of a lot like Reddit, in a weird sort of way. All text.
alt.games.final Fantasy was one of them.
Yeah. And I was into like, alt that anime. I don't even remember. There was a million of them, and they all had alt in the title. I guess for some reason, I don't know why. But anyway, I think Jeremy advertised looking for translators in a game group or something like that.
But you didn't know what. I clearly remember that you didn't know which project that he was working on.
Yeah.
You didn't know.
Yeah, he didn't
because
say.
I remember.
Yeah.
He probably didn't say.
No.
Because I really remember that you had long talk on the phone with
Yes.
Jeremy, and you hung the phone, and then you came up, and then it says like, "Do you know who that is? Do you know who that is? He worked on like Metal Gear Solid."
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then,
I didn't, because I didn't know he worked on Metal Gear Solid. And like during the conversation, we were discussing, because he's trying to kind of vet his translators. I said, what have you played recently? What are some good localizations? And I said, because at the time, Metal Gear Solid to me was the kind of pinnacle of really good game localization.
yeah, and also they use a motion capture. Now today is so
Yeah, like recording with like actual voice actors.
now today is like duh, but back in time it's just totally
that was cutting edge. And so of course Jeremy worked on it. So of course I was like, we instantly got the job. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, you like that game? Well, guess what? I remember, feeling like I had really kind of, reached a certain pinnacle or so. Wow, I'm like talking to the guy who's in charge of localizing Metal Gear Solid. And then he told me that the project was Dragon Quest, or Dragon Warrior, I guess as it was called back then. I was like, wow, God, that's a series with a lot of history and a lot of like cultural value to it. So that's how it started, basically with that post online, which I must have been on Usenet, because they're like Twitter, social media. This is decades before that kind of stuff started.
Yep, this pretty much was the social media.
Yeah, totally. No, it was.
Seven had already been out for a little while in Japan. Did you already have an idea of what you were going to present?
No. I mean, and this is, it's interesting you bring that up, because back in time, especially in the 90s, there was often like a huge gap between when products of all kinds came out in Japan.
Yeah.
And when they came out in the West, whether it's anime, whether it's like toys, whether it's games. Now, like we're in this era of like SimShip and like simultaneous release, whether it's like Shonen Jump magazine, who's like basically releasing new, installments of Naruto in real time, or like, games come out same day. Games come out with like multiple languages on the same, disc, or now it's like, you get it online, but it's people raised in that environment today would probably be shocked to know how much of a gap there was between products coming out in Japan and the West.
At least a year.
Oh yeah. So I don't think we actually even went into that with any familiarization. Like nowadays, it's understood you're going to play the game, you're going to play through it, or you're going to play a significant chunk of it, or you're going to at least, I don't really think.
I don't remember, except just the Zenkaku. The big font.
The big font, yeah. Well, there wasn't time. There wasn't time. That was the other thing. I mean, it was just an absolutely massive project.
Oh yeah,
the amount of text
in a tight the word limit.
Yeah,
there's some famous photos of like the giant shelf full of binders with all the text in the game.
Justin Lucas from Enix, he once said, "I wish I had taken a picture of how much text was in that game. If I remember correctly, it was something like 123-inch three-ring binders full of paper."
It makes sense. And like, back people played Dragon Quest almost like visual novels today. Like they were immersive experiences that were designed to be strung out over a lot of text. Like, because they appealed to a very different demographic than kind of hardcore gamers. There were like these kitchen gamers, that's an actual word in Japanese for like mothers who would play after their kids went to school, and like, it was like a societal phenomenon, and it really appealed to people who were not traditional gamers. So I think that's the reason why the text really ballooned. People wanted an experience that would be kind of strung out and extended. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So, it was huge. We knew it was huge. And what Hiroko is referring to is the fact that at the time, like, you couldn't do anything with custom fonts or anything like that. So like Japanese characters are what known as double byte characters, because you need extra room to display them. And there is an English font set within the Japanese font set. So you can display Romaji, which are what they call, English alphabetical, alphanumerical things. And unfortunately on this project, due to technical limitations, we had to use double byte English characters in the translation, which really, it halves the amount of text you can display on screen at any given time.
Yeah, and it's doubly bad because, the Japanese has a kanji characters to say, for example, the kanji for purple, it's one kanji, one character, just one double byte. But if you type into purple, the translation, PURBLE. Yeah. So that's right there. It's I remember all the translators, including you, people, Japanese are cheating. Japanese cheating. It was
menus were hell.
So I don't remember any of it except just double bytes tight word limit.
Oh man, it was rough. And I remember Jeremy like pushed back, and was really like, can you please, is there anything you can do about this? And they couldn't. So we just had to stick with that. But the myths, Dragon Quest or Warrior, I guess it was released as in America, 7. I mean, I just remember literally coming home from work and just sitting in front of the computer and doing that for hours and hours. And we started as translators, and then Jeremy kind of promoted us to editors, I remember. And there was just this constantly revolving team of translation people. Jeremy was just like desperate to get enough people. And I wouldn't be surprised if like 50 translators worked on that.
Oh yeah. Not only is it a big game, it also introduced the party chat, and you have to talk to your party members after they react to practically everything in the game. So when you're an editor, what's it like working on that aspect and going back and forth to keep all the quotes and characterization consistent?
That's so the editor's job was to keep things consistent, but it was a constant race for time in that. And there were no translation tools. Everything was being done. I think Hiroko and I were talking about this earlier. I think maybe towards the end of that project, Jeremy and an engineer friend of his developed like a prototype translation memory system. They called it WordBots, and it was very cutting edge stuff. Nobody else had. This was way before now. Like programs like Trados and MemoQ are widely used in the industry, but Jeremy and his engineer friend had like kind of come up with this idea. We definitely used that on later projects with Jeremy. Shenmue 2 for sure.
So multiple translators can go in.
Tales of Destiny, maybe?
I think so. I mean, the older project that we worked on.
But that's a whole nother story. But yeah, it was tough. Consistency was really difficult. And to be honest, back in time in the 90s, like that wasn't the priority. Like coming up with voices and maintaining them, it was just, can we get this done? Because the Enix side just wanted the text.
Right.
They just wanted something that they could implement in the game. They wanted to just be able to release the game in the States. And I get the impression that like a lot of Japanese companies, to the higher ups, like targeting the American market was not that important. Like Dragon Quest was a huge hit in Japan, and to them, the fact that it was even being localized into English was probably kind of like an extra, Like I don't
kind of from what I've learned from talking to several people back in the day, and also kind of what was going on now. They were a small office, and they were just kind of an afterthought of Japan, and they really did try and do the best with what they had. But with 7, it was Justin, the former product manager. It was really a race against time because they wanted to get that game out, and it was also a huge game, and the PlayStation life cycle was dying fast.
Yes. Well, nowadays, and starting, probably didn't start for another decade after that, like localization teams started to have more of a stake and a voice in the development process, and games started to be made from the ground up, not only with localization kind of elements and tools built in, but also like an understanding that it would take X amount of time to localize X amount of text. At the time in the late 90s, even those really fundamental questions of how long is this going to take were not really set and understood. And so there were a lot of promises made and schedules constructed that weren't really feasible or realistic by modern standards. And that's not that's not kind of, I don't mean that as any kind of like to cast shade on Enix or Jeremy or anything like that. It was just how it was back then. Like we were all kind of making up the rule book as we went along.
So what was the turnaround time that you were given for that project from start to finish?
I just remember it being too short. It was months. We're talking months, but I remember like just having these constant phone calls with Jeremy where like we're both kind of like, oh my God, how is this going to get done? And then like Jeremy like took on another project, and we got taken off 7 and put on Tales of Destiny. And so we had to quickly rush through Tales of Destiny and then get back to 7. And by that time, like a bunch of other translators and editors had cycled through, and it was kind of a patchwork, to be honest. And it was just, that's just how it was back then, really.
You were working for the government.
Yeah, I'm working by day. I'm translating. And Hiroko is like studying for her, is trying to write her thesis, for.
No, that was after.
Yeah,
after,
but it was just, that was after you
that,
graduated. Yeah, but God, that was so not a lot of sleep happening, but we made a lot of really great friends, and like it was a really great experience. And the things I think all of us learned from that really helped us grow as translators and localization professionals. I mean, you literally at this time in history, if you said you were in localization, even a lot of game companies wouldn't understand what that meant. What is that? Oh, you mean you translate?
Yeah.
And this is before localization really took off. And it was also before, like, I remember Hiroko and I would sell our services as AltJapan to companies, and they go, well, why do you need a Japanese person?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, the game's in Japanese. It's better to have natives of both languages working on it. And they're like, well, I don't know. Now it's understood that you need oversight of people who are natives in multiple, in both languages, target and source, to get the highest quality. But back in time, translation and localization were seen by many companies as kind of secretarial in nature.
And also solo work.
You can't translate by yourself? What? Kind of, they'd almost be like aggressive, some companies that we approached. But it was good. It helped us weed out the people who were kind of more serious about localization, because, we quickly zeroed in on Squaresoft as being a company, partially because I went to college with a kind of legendary Squaresoft translator by the name of Alex O. Smith, and Alex localized the Bouncer, and what else? He did a lot of Vagrant Story.
Final Fantasy.
Oh, okay.
Final Fantasy. That was later. After he went freelance, he worked on the even-numbered Final Fantasy games. Like he did 10 and 10-2. But Alex was like a really he went into games immediately after graduating from school. He immediately got kind of picked up by Squaresoft. I think he was working in like their Hawaii offices for a while, and then he went to Tokyo. But so he knowing him, he gave us like the intro to the localization team at Squaresoft, which is rapidly, I think this is right around the time they became Square Enix.
Okay.
Right,
Well, he introduced us before that, because I remember we were working on Final Fantasy 11.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
We did a lot of that.
We kind of slipped under my research.
No. It's not really widely known, because we didn't do like any of the in-game dialogue. We worked on the like help files and manuals. We were doing
we did that when we were still in Washington.
Yeah, we were still in DC.
So.
And I remember like the idea of like hooking into a massively multiplayer online game was a super cutting edge at the time. And it was tough. It was really tough to do technically, because you weren't going through the internet. You were actually like hooking into their intranet or something. Okay. Yeah, like remember they sent us like a PlayStation test station.
That's right.
We had to like string up Ethernet. We had to get this whole thing going on in the house to like to accommodate it in the apartment. But anyway, yeah. So we had some experience with Final Fantasy with Squaresoft, with Square, and then after they became Square Enix and they started doing Final Fantasy, when Dragon Quest VIII came up, I forget exactly how we got introduced to that team or whatever, whether it was Alex who introduced us or
we were part of the
Aziz Hinoshita. Yeah. Aziz Hinoshita was like the head of the Final Fantasy XI.
At the time already, we know the people in the Square. All the translators and working for Square. We are friends, and so
yeah. So anyway,
that was after, of course.
So that's how we got into That's how we got onto Dragon Quest, and by this point it was Quest VIII. Richard, I remember there was Jin Kimura was the production manager, a guy. I don't think he's with them anymore. And then Richard Honeywood was the localization manager on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And
and you had Will and Claire from Plus Alpha, and Morgan Rushton from Slock.
And Morgan. And that was final. Actually, I'm not going to. You ask questions. Sorry, yes. we're taking over.
No, it's okay. Not at all. Liam, you had something to ask first, I believe.
Yeah, sure. Did working on Dragon Warrior 7 prepare you at all for Dragon Quest 8 in some ways?
In a sense,
really.
But there were very different. Like the technology had changed, the attitude toward localization had changed. In a lot of ways, I think you can say that Final Fantasy. Sorry, I keep saying that. Dragon Quest 8 was kind of the first modern localization project.
That was the first. I think that was the first Dragon Quest made by Square Enix.
Yes.
Not just Enix alone.
Yeah.
So not really. Yeah, it was I think
It started when it was still Enix. And then I think like the merger happened and like, well, we'll just release it now.
I mean, the lead time, the dev time on that must have been on the order of years, you know. But by that point, localization was understood to be a necessity. Like you couldn't, if you had any aspirations of being a real like international game company, you needed a localization.
Yeah, and so because everything was new, so the aim was they tried to make British English.
Yeah, in that game.
Yeah, which is pretty new back then, but they didn't want to be authentic British English because the biggest market is America. So that's why we were part of the team.
Yeah.
So make it British English like, so that Americans like Matt can understand.
Yeah. You know, okay. Because there's a danger that if you go to British English and, you know, you have too many British in-jokes and too many, you know, things like that, that it's going to be kind of incomprehensible. And I remember like the James Bond movies, like that kind of British, not that they wanted to make like a James Bond style vernacular, but like those are, they star a British hero in a British setting, but anybody in the world can understand them, you know, that kind of thing. That was, and Richard was really, really, really insistent that this be a kind of British forward game because it's set in a kind of medieval world. Mm-hmm. You know, castles and kings and things like that. And that was his directive from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, because it seems like he really set out to do a localization in a completely new style than really anything that had been done before.
Yes.
But you were working. That was the first kind of in-house localization, and it was going on while development was happening. Yes. So what was that like? Because like you had Richard Honeywood, you had Will and Claire and Morgan. So you're working with a pretty big team. So like what parts, just like how did you collaborate, and what parts can you say like that's mine, I did that?
We definitely like we split up the towns. I remember that. The one I definitely remember.
No, first we played games.
Yeah, there was a huge familiarization, like a month-long.
It's 1 month,
and they paid us to play the game for a month, which was unheard of at the time. Wow. I remember that was part of it.
But the thing is like, but it's not playing game. We have to read every single text.
Yeah, go down every.
So if you die, you have to start all over again, and which is not good. So they gave us they call it God mode.
Yeah.
So basically you have like, I don't remember, but it's the highest.
Yeah, basically maxed out all your stats.
10,000 HP or
so
40,000 items or whatever, and then it's so that you just cannot die. And then we played a game and of course sometimes we have to die because we need to check and what kind of text pop out. Yeah. But so it's not enjoyable. It's a job, but we did it. Will and Claire did it in their.
So for that aspect, we were playing at our houses. You know, we were playing like, you know, in our home offices or whatever.
Then we met in Tokyo at the Square Enix office, and then to spend days, 2 weeks.
No, like it was at least a full month or more.
No. Because we had a meeting.
Oh, the pre thing.
Yeah, so to create the glossaries.
We had to create a glossary.
The
characterizations. We split up the towns because we wanted each town to have like a different. You know, Richard's idea was that each town, being a separate town, would have its own kind of, you know, lingo and vernacular, and some would be more British, some would be less. You know, we took Impeach-U, I think was a big one, and I know we had like 2 or 3
So
others.
Anyway, so we established the firm, the vocabulary.
Yeah.
And then we separate.
Yep.
And then we separate we worked in our own office. We were working on an office instead of a Square Enix office.
Yeah.
And then it did the work separately by town, like Matt said.
Yeah, like a line
but
dialogue.
It's not totally separated. We swap. We swap the translations, and then let the Will and Claire look at our translation, and then we looked at their translations. And then they made a comments, and then it's open again, and then Morgan edited it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then once a week or something, twice a week, we met in the Square Enix offices, and then they talk, and then
I remember. Well, the biggest difficulty I remember was the magic system, like coming up with how we were going to localize, you know, meta and and like all of these things. And all of us, like for a week and 2 weeks, came up with these competing different ideas And some were good, some were stupid. You know, it's just in a brainstorming process. It's just you have to like push the envelope of what's possible.
But the thing is, like the target text, the Japanese text are so much. So we like we said on the tweet, we didn't have break time. We just could not afford it. So we just sit down in the room and then discuss.
Yeah.
And then whenever somebody wants to go to the bathroom, just stand up and go and come back.
Yeah.
And then they eat lunch together and still talking.
Yeah. We're just locked in the room. We're talking at lunch. Yeah, you were like dreaming about it, weren't you?
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah.
Will had said a while back that everyone dreamt up all kinds of crazy jokes, and you two tried in vain to keep everyone in check, but soon realized resistance was futile and joined the party.
Oh no! I don't remember it that way. The resistance. I remember the one resistance was that they wanted to put in rhyming Cockney slang in a lot of places.
Oh wow! Yes,
they did. Yangus ended up being Yangus having it, but like I was just like this is really funny, especially when you guys are acting it out. But I just don't get it. I don't understand what he's saying. So like the concession made was that they would whatever Yangus said in rhyming Cockney, he would say again, or some other character would say to explain
what it is. Yeah.
It became there was no. We loved. I mean, there was a lot of arguing over which jokes you wanted in and which you wanted out. Or like which were going too far, like that kind of stuff. But it wasn't like we were hired as the serious people or anything like that. Definitely not.
He was saying it in just like a playful way and just how much fun.
On it. No, it was great. It was actually really fun to collaborate like that. And I remember distinctly one of the funny things was like these conversations would go on for hours and hours, and I would constantly be like, okay, well, that's it. Great. We're done. Right. Done. Next. And then like, I remember Clara being like, oh, here's Matt, trying to put a pin in the conversation right here. And it was just funny, but those kind of collaborations and those kind of conversations are very rare in localization these days. It's been kind of commoditized, like get it out, get it done quick. And so the idea of putting all the translators and the editor, and Richard's not only kind of the head guy, he's also got like a lot of technical background. He was a programmer. He had actually programmed on the Raiden, like overhead shooting games and stuff like that. So like he was like a whiz when it came up to technical solutions to problems. Having everybody in the same room, whether we were laughing or strangling each other was great.
Yeah.
I've got a really quick kind of tangent question. Then I'll let Liam ask his question. This is something I've always wondered about. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. Who came first? Did Yangus come first, or did Ricky Grover come first? Because their designs they look exactly alike. So like I'm wondering if they had the basic idea and if they cast the actor first, or
yeah, right, the actor. No. Yangus the character definitely came first. Definitely.
Okay.
And then I remember Richard coming back from England where he had done casting sessions or whatever. And he's like, we got Yangus. Got this guy. And like
that's amazing.
Because what usually happens in situations like this is that the recording studio will send you a bunch of different actors, like 3 actors for each role. Like they'll send you samples of them. First, it'll just be off their like kind of their clip file. Do you know what I mean? Like every actor has like their kind of vocal resume.
Yeah, like they're real.
They're real, exactly. And then like once you narrow it down, like maybe they might send 5 or 6, then you'll narrow it down to 3, and then you'll have those 3 read actual lines in the character's dialogue. And then together with the director of the game, you'll decide. And in a lot of cases, the Japanese directors tend to like really want to pick foreign voices that sound a lot like the Japanese ones that don't actually work in English. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like for a really strong female character, they'll want to pick like a really high-pitched, squeaky person because that's what, kawaii voices sound like in Japanese. But
it hurts my ears.
Richard was really, really strict with them, I guess you can say, about saying, no, we have to do these characters, like this kind of characters, this kind of voice and this. And I think he had a lot more headache than we did. He was really in charge of that process. But yeah, I don't know where he found that guy who did Yangus, but he was Yangus.
So when you're brainstorming so many ideas, unfortunately, a few things get cut. What were some of the things that you wish had made it in? And was there anything you passionately fought to keep?
I remember. What do you remember? Did you have any jokes? I mean, there were tons of names that we come up for. You know, I remember like one. I remember coming up and like, and so sometimes somebody would come up with a joke and like the other parts of the team wouldn't get. You know how it goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one. There's a dog, like a bulldog, and he's all in red. And I remember I'm like, I want to call this guy Mars Rover. You know, like. The little truck that's driving around on Mars.
Yeah.
Like nobody got it. They're like, that's not funny. And I'm like, but oh, he's red like Mars. And he's
I love that.
And I don't know if that actually made it through the game.
That's still funny today.
Yeah, I know.
I love that.
So, we needed more Americans on this team, man. So
the one I remember was the Prince Charmley.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
That the character, who was like a plumpy
the pampered prince character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's famous.
So we wanted to name him Prince Charmless. And
well, no. So the joke was, and I remember whenever this is like a writer's room. So you need to get the whole when you're pitching ideas in a writer's room, you're trying to get buy-in from the other writers.
Yeah.
Like if you can make them laugh or
and then you get the cookie points.
Exactly. So like this is true on Dragon Quest VIII. It's true whether you're writing for TV. It's true whether you're writing
other
for
project.
It's just the writer's room. It's just how it goes. And I remember I just had this idea that because the character is such a nose pick.
Literally.
He wanted to come up with something that kind of made him seem like that. And so like the idea was that his parents had named him Charmley, like in the French, like with a French pronunciation, but Yangus in particular always read it Charmless, and other people around over, and he said, no, it's Chamley, but it's spelled Charmless. And I remember like Morgan in particular was like, yes, and like, you know, I think Claire and Will were kind of on board.
But they're laughing.
And then Richard was really against it for some reason.
It's too obvious or something.
He's like, nobody would name their kid. Nobody would spell their. And I'm like, yeah, but the dragons don't exist either. You know, if we're talking about things that don't exist. So this went around and around. And I think finally Richard approved it with he injected something else into it to make it palatable for him.
Yeah.
But it's a collaborative process. But I remember that whole thing. Are we going to call him Charmless or Chamley or what the spelling of it was? That was a big, big debate that I remember really well.
Yeah.
My first.
And then of course the famous line was Gojoshar.
Oh, Gojoshar. Yeah. I wrote about this on Twitter, but Morgan had of course he's an editor. He has a real ear for language, and he had taken the train so many times that he had memorized Shibuya. He had memorized the
announcement.
Yeah, the conductor's announcement.
Yeah, conductor says Shibuya, Gojoshar. And thank the Shibuya. Thanks for writing.
Yeah, thanks.
But he listened in every single day, so he started.
He started copying. And so he would come in. I remember the doors to the office. He would come into the office. The doors would open. Gojoshar, arigatou gozaimasu, and everybody starts cracking up.
So that quickly turned into the inside joke. And then it's like, okay, well, let's just insert it in the game. And
yes.
then
because it became an inside joke. We started just saying it.
We started immediately. We started each other.
Everybody just started saying that when they came into the office. Even people not on the team. It's like an open plan office.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we realized at some point, I can't remember whether it's Richard or us or Claire and Will, we're like, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if we had some kind of unique cultural linguistic things in some of these towns that expressed the idea that maybe they were speaking English as a second language. Yeah. And it ended up getting injected into Impichu. Yes. Where Gojoshar is their greeting. And I remember Richard was like, no, we can't do this. We can't do this.
Come on, we can do this.
And he actually had a big meeting with it. Yeah. We weren't involved in the meetings. None of us were involved in the meetings with the NX people. Yeah. Richard would have to go, and sometimes he'd come back really stressed out from those, having to get buy-in from them on something we were doing or whatever. It's just, how the process works in any game. And he got buy-in on that. Yeah, he actually managed to sell it to them. And so that made it into the game. But that was another fun thing, yeah.
That was a fun thing. Yeah.
And then, there's so many. I mean, because you had to name all of the different, monster characters. So and some of them are set, like slimes are going to be slimes. You know what I mean? And if the name worked, we kept it. But if the name, there's so many word plays and puns in Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
The biggest one being the magic system.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but that was really tough because English does not have the same type of onomatopoeia that Japanese does.
And also we have to classify.
Yes, we had to come up with hierarchies and
Yes.
stuff. Richard ended up coming up with the system on that one.
Mhm.
Frizzle, kafrizzle. And I remember seeing online after the game came out that people thought that he was or we were, because nobody at the time knew exactly who had done what, that we were like Snoop Dogg
Oh,
the
yeah.
dog. He used to talk like, and
That was,
people were like,
that was
"Oh,
the
man."
number one comment from everyone because Snoop had adopted that way of
Yes.
speaking at the time. Now he just hangs out with Martha Stewart.
And I can just state for the record that like literally did not enter into anybody's thinking at all. I mean, I listened to I love Doggy Style. Like that was like a classic album when I was in college. But like, but it was not, that was just not, we were so desperate to come up with something. Like I remember, I don't know, somebody came up with a Latin style thing. Somebody came up with like, well, let's just do a Japanese style thing. Somebody came up with this. Somebody came up with that. Morgan came up with one. Claire, Will, Hiroko. And finally it was Richard's like, you know what? It's going to be Kafrizzle. Like, it's just going to be this. And
I love
he
that.
pushed it. So, but yeah, I don't think Richard was channeling Snoop Dogg. No.
Yeah, but one by one. Yeah.
And it was tough because you could always poke a hole in it. Right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, well, then why is this? Like, if this is Kasizzle and this is Kafrizzle, why is this not Kajizzle? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. But no, it's because you're making it up. And so, like, whatever system there was, people were just poking holes in it nonstop, which is how you make something stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
That this is a good process. Like that kind of, I would say that like one of the big things I learned from this is that, the realities of working with a team that has such disparate cultural backgrounds, the friction is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
The arguments are good, and then the arguments never devolved into like throwing books across the room or anything like that. Don't get the wrong.
Because everybody wants to do right. Not
Yes.
right. Everybody wants to make good product.
Yes.
So everybody was passionate.
There was a lot of passion. There was a lot of friction. There was a lot of laughing. There were a lot of tears.
I'm glad nobody got attacked with a Dragon Quest VII script binder.
Nobody's like beating anybody with like one of those like strategy guides. Nothing like that. No. There was no like. I can't even remember anybody actually getting angry. Do you know what I mean? There was no like stomping out. There was some real stressful like, geez, I don't know how much longer I can take this meeting kind of things, but nothing.
But it's a job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in some ways, eight really kicked off an evolution in localization, like not just translating the game, but presenting it in a very unique and identifying style. Did you realize what you were doing at that time? I mean, and just afterwards, just like what are your thoughts on its impact, not just for the localization, but where the series is now?
We were just happy that like we were finally in a team, in a company that took localization seriously, where it was thought. I remember really just being happy about that. I don't think we felt we were on the cutting edge. We felt like this is how it should be done.
How it should be, yes.
And Richard was super, super detailed. So like he was normally in games at that point, like people didn't bother changing the text if like a variable was singular versus plural, like I'm trying to think of an example, like you're carrying one book versus 5 books, and so usually what would happen is you have 1 books, you have 2 books. You have 3 books, you know what I mean? Like in sentences that called back to variables. And Richard was like, no, I'm going to like personally handwrite code to make sure that that sentences with variables in them grammatically alter based on what the number of things being counted is and things like that. That was really cutting edge. At the time.
That's amazing.
I don't know if any other game did that. And Richard had the chops to do that kind of thing. He'd write these elaborate macros, like Excel macros and things like that, for us and for the team. And that was really, I was like, wow, this is like, I love it when a plan comes together kind of thing. It was, it was good.
It was experience.
It was experience. Yeah. And I don't know how much that really affected other localization teams or anything. We never actually worked for Square Enix again after that.
Okay. I remember playing other games and other RPGs after that, and it's not that that work was bad. I was just like, oh, okay. After playing 8, I was like, oh, this is pretty different, because I think I played Final Fantasy IV for the PSP not too long after that, and like compared to 8, like I said, it's not that it was bad. I was just like, oh, okay, 8 kind of stands out now.
Yeah,
it really stands out now.
I don't know that it was the first seriously localized game, because, as I said, Alex was working on like Vagrant Story.
It was ambitious.
It was hugely ambitious. Yeah, definitely ambitious. And so from that standpoint, I mean, it was great. It was great to get to work on that. We got to meet. I remember Yuji Horii like kind of came down to meet us at one point.
That's right.
Sunglasses.
That's right.
We've had several in-house experiences like since then. It's very rare to do that kind of thing. But I remember when we were working on Ninja Gaiden, we were working kind of in a very similar situation on the Ninja Gaiden series, and the localization producer Andrew Szymanski called down Itagaki-san. I remember him coming to this leather jacket, sunglasses.
Yes.
And it was like every game director, like in my mind, every game director is like sunglasses, kind of like, oh, hey, cool, thanks, guys. And then like leaves, and because they're kind of like above it all,
Mm-hmm.
They got people working for them, but it's always funny to kind of meet people like that when you're in the trenches. And so 8 was a kind of first experience working in-house like that, and we did get to do it a couple times after that in other projects, but never to the kind of immersive degree that was.
Okay.
I think that's still kind of uncommon these days, that you have that team working so tightly together, or people just kind of like basically living together to get the game done.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
so Dragon Quest has recently turned 35, and forever has a place in Japanese pop culture. How were you introduced to Dragon Quest? Were you fans before?
I played it on the NES. I played Dragon Warrior on the NES. Did you ever play Quest?
No.
You never played. But you knew of it.
Of course. But really, the only connections that I have is a Toriyama Akira.
Yeah.
Which is manga, Dr. Slump, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't escape it. It's like the Star Wars of games in Japan.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know
That's funny.
that it's like that, but certainly in the 80s and 90s that was the case. Like when a Dragon Quest game came out, it was like a red letter.
But of course, so I have to familiarize themselves. I flip through the pages of the guidebooks how to play the Dragon Quest playbook, for the previous games and stuff, and then But yeah, if you're asking me if I played a game before, no.
Okay. But yeah, no, I mean, it was just an honor to be working on it, and like I actually had to revisit this. I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning. I wrote a book. It's called Pure Invention: How Japan Made the Modern World, and it's a history of modern times. It's told through Japanese consumer products, ranging from toys and like karaoke and Hello Kitty products to things like anonymous image boards, and of course, video games are in there. Mm-hmm. And so I had to kind of do a lot of research on it's a cultural history, so it's not actually a history of the products. It's like how these products transform Japanese society and then transform Western tastes in the process. And like I went back and watched a lot of contemporary news footage about Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest comes up at one point. It's not like a main focus, but it talks about how games transitioned from this kind of time-killing leisure pursuit of Space Invaders and Pac-Man and stuff into kind of this whole new form of escape for people. And Dragon Quest was really at the forefront of that in Japan. Really at the forefront of mainstreaming of games into mainstream society, not hardcore gamers, not people whose identity is a gamer, but people at large. And
huge.
I was huge. Yeah, and I was struck when I was writing that stuff, that like what an honor it was to get to work on those projects in kind of real time. Some of them.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm actually reading the book now.
Oh, thank you.
It's really very rich, full of it's very thoroughly researched and very enjoyable read.
The paperback edition with revisions post 2021 just came out yesterday.
That's right.
Oh, nice.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So please, find it where books are sold near you. Pure Invention.
Okay. We'll touch on that a little bit more later. But what have been What have been some of your favorite Dragon Quest related memories, either playing the games or the stories working on them, or some of the people you've met along the way?
So many. I mean, we wouldn't have met Jeremy Blaustein without Dragon Quest. We wouldn't have met Richard. We wouldn't have met Claire and Will. We met a lot of interesting people, had a lot of interesting experiences. I mean, what is your most memorable Dragon Quest moment?
I think it's my so-called nightmare, I guess.
What's the nightmare? Tell us the nightmare.
Basically, I was dreaming. I was in the game world, the Dragon Quest VIII game world, and I joined the party. And and my attack is basically translating their lines, and they became all the characters became so frustrated with me because I was slow. And right before I woke up in the Dragon Quest theme song, da 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 da. Okay, it's just playing, and I woke up hard. It's like, oh my god!
Oh man!
I think the crazy part is because even though to me that was a stress from job, but if you are not in the game industry, it's just a funny story.
Yeah.
And so none of my friends took it seriously. They just laughed, and I just laughed.
Yeah, because working in games sounds like a dream job. That's how fucking stressful it is most of the time.
I mean, just imagine that the youngest started cockney or whatever, and then they just yelling at me. It's like, sorry. So that's my memory of that.
Yes.
The vivid memory.
Yeah.
And then at the Gojo Star.
Yeah, definitely. No, it was fun. It was like it felt like we were really had reached a new level. You know what I mean? Like
we created something.
We started working on paper in a pizza restaurant in the suburbs of Washington D.C. and here we are sitting in the halls of venerated Square Enix, translating one of the most popular video game franchises Japan has ever produced. It really felt like a personal high point for us in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Awesome. Amazing. So living in Japan, has Dragon Quest played a role in a way you'd never expect? For example, do you run into large crowds on release day or meet someone who's someone else who's worked in the series in some way?
I mean, it's a calling card, like if you mention you worked on that, everybody, instantly everybody's, oh, wow, Dragon Quest, you know what I mean? It's like, it's something you know. But, now, of course, there's digital release and so the giant crowds aren't there. And to be honest, there's so many games now that they've done all these kind of spin-offs and mobile games. So I don't think Dragon Quest releases have the same grip on the Japanese imagination that they once did. But it's still a very popular and beloved franchise.
You had mentioned on Twitter that you had worked with someone who drew the strategy guides for 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
For one of your books.
Well, when we were locked in the Thunderdome cage with Morgan and everybody at Square Enix, we were given tons of research materials to assist us in doing our projects and doing our translations, and stacks of strategy guides, Japanese strategy guides. And paging through one, we realized that it was actually illustrated not by Akira Toriyama, even though it looked just like him. It was illustrated by a gentleman named Yutaka Kondo, who is a really good friend of ours. He was just in our friend circle at the time. And after that, right? Before?
Ooh, nice.
Well, we went on to we hired Kondo-san
it's after that.
to illustrate our book, Ninja Attack, True Tales of Samurai, Assassins, and Outlaws, which is a kind of guidebook, an illustrated guidebook to ninja culture, published by Tuttle in 2009 or 10 or so. It's a sequel to our book, Yokai Attack, the Japanese yokai survival guide, which is turning into a regular, pitch session for our books. But Kondo-san is just like a lot of talented artists, is really flexible. He has his own style, but then he can kind of mimic others. And he got the job, I guess, to illustrate those guidebooks. And it was really funny. I remember talking to him after. I'm like, we found your guidebook. He's like, everybody thinks it's Akira Toriyama. It's me. That was really funny. I mean, because those games are such an intersection of so many cultures. They're an intersection of video game culture. They're an intersection of manga and anime culture.
Yes.
They're an intersection of otaku culture. And in a way, the Dragon Quest series played a key role in the mainstreaming of Japanese subcultures of all kinds into the kind of mainstream. So it's a really important cultural product as well as just like a hit best-selling product in general.
Right. You've worked on several pieces of media that have been like pretty big staples of Japanese pop culture. I mean, how does it feel shouldering the weight of these iconic franchises and presenting it to a completely new audience?
Well, we didn't, we even as the translator, as stressful as it is, we didn't make any of these things, right? Like we're just kind of we're kind of helping them along a little bit. So right. I don't like as much pride as I think we feel in working on, for instance, Dragon Quest VIII, which is, and it is pride. I think Dragon Quest VIII remains the single top-selling PlayStation 2 game of all time in Japan. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I don't think there's another title that beat it because it came out pretty close to the end and it was a huge hit. But like, for us, it's like we do our best and we move on. And like the stresses that we feel are much more about getting things done on time and in a way that pleases the clients than it is about worrying what our legacy is going to be or what, even what consumer, of course, we do want consumers to have a good time, but our clients are the clients. Our clients are the people who are paying us to localize the game. And that's actually something a lot of consumers don't realize. Localizers aren't really working for them. They're working for the companies who make the final decisions on a lot of things. Localization has actually become kind of a four-letter word in a lot of fan circles, I think, in recent years, because they think that localizers are somehow censoring or changing things. No localization person makes changes to the core content of a game without the explicit consent and often at the direction of the stakeholders who make and produce the game themselves. Whether it's, things like, please change the crosses in Dragon Quest VIII so they look like tridents so that we don't get accused of like making, parodying Christianity. Or whether it's, not on Dragon Quest VIII, but on other projects, we even had, we'll change this character to a female. We'll change this male to a female, or this female to a male, or we'll eliminate this character altogether. What do you think will sell? Like the only thing the creators of the game want is for their product to be a huge hit. It's a product. It is culture, but it's culture secondary to being a product first. And so I think a lot of consumers abroad don't realize just how much the people creating these games prioritize them being successful products over the way that they're necessarily taken as cultural products, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
So how has Dragon Quest impacted Japanese culture and society in a way that North America or European fans might not understand?
I mean, recently, back in time, there were literal almost street riots to get the game. Kids skipped school
and line up.
Like there were it would be on the news. There's amazing, if you have access to news archives, I think some of the stuff is actually on YouTube. And I posted one in my Twitter thread. The contemporary news reports are like breathless and like, society is falling apart. People are playing games. Oh my God. Children, cats and dogs sleeping together. It's like,
that's hysteria.
Yeah, it's nothing new. I mean, they said the same thing about manga. They said the same thing about rock and roll. They said the same thing about women reading novels in the 1800s. I mean, it's like, it's just the new thing is always the scary thing for a lot of people. And, while I don't think Dragon Quest necessarily has the same grip on the Japanese psyche that it once did, I think it's important for people abroad to realize just how much of a grip it had in the 80s in particular.
Yes.
And the 90s. Yeah. It really made RPGs a thing for Japanese,
Now it's a phone game.
And now everybody's on their iPhones playing games everywhere. You can play your iPhone probably has 10 times the processing power of a, PlayStation or whatever, probably more. And, we all carry consoles in our pockets. We all game all the time. And Dragon Quest played a key role in that, I think.
That's true. I mean, RPGs were pretty much like I always joke that I'm one of 5 American Dragon Quest fans. So so when I'm wearing a Dragon Quest shirt out in public and somebody recognizes it, I'm like, oh great, I found a 6th one.
Yeah. It was niche in the States.
Oh yeah. Just just RPGs in general, 15 years ago, not a lot of people played them, and now it's one of the top genres.
Well, when I was a kid growing up, you know, in the especially in the early '80s, the idea of an RPG on a console was kind of unthinkable. We played like Ultima, you know, we played Wizardry on PCs, on our computers. That was where Americans were RPG gaming at the time. And I think the real genius of, you know, Yuji Horii and his team and Dragon Quest was translating what was a very complicated experience requiring a lot of keys into something that you could play with a Famicom controller, which is just two buttons and a you know, D-pad. That really took some doing, but by simplifying things, it opened up RPG playing to a much bigger audience than simply, you know, PC geeks, which is what we were, you know, at the time.
But, you know, also that at the time period in Japan, there's such a small number of people using PC.
Yeah, much less than America.
So yeah, so it's that's part of huge the part too. I mean, to make the game that way, you know, not
so to kind of
PC.
switch. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, just go ahead.
So so to get into kind of the details of how you two work, you've been translating and localizing for quite a while. So what's your average day like, if you even have one?
Well, you know, now we have, I don't want to say we've transitioned out of localization, but most of our time has shifted into content production. Writing, you know, about 5 or 6 years back, we started transitioning into kind of production assistance. Like we would, especially on games that were designed in Japan but being produced in the States, and we would kind of sit between the two teams and interpret for them and translate all the documentation. And the game was almost secondary. Like when the game was done, like that would get localized too, but the majority of work was translating technical documents and stuff. We started doing that with Lost Planet 3, and then in a succession of other co-productions, Japanese and American co-productions for a variety of manufacturers. And by the time we came out of that process, we were starting to do things like writing scripts for games. Hiroko and I wrote the script for World of Demons, which is a Platinum game that came out earlier this year.
Okay.
It's on the Apple Arcade. So we wrote the script for that.
Nice.
We've been doing other things like that. And I was, for the last 2 years, 3 years, working on Pure Invention, my book, which was like a full-time thing.
So the biggest localization project, the last and biggest localization project that we worked on was manga, Doraemon.
Yeah, Doraemon. We translated all of that, and that was a year of like full time. We didn't have time for games when we were local. Doraemon is like 16,000 pages of manga. And so that was like a full year of nothing but Doraemon. So like each, you know, you can't even look at it day to day, year to year. It's very different what we're working on. Right now, we're basically working on books, writing books. I'm writing articles for the, like, you know, by writing my book led to doing a lot of magazine work. And so I've become
You had a New Yorker article that came out yesterday?
Yeah, and Demon Slayer. Boy, that stirred up quite a bit of controversy online. I wasn't expecting. Apparently the social media team highlighted some aspect of the article that a lot of anime fans weren't really happy with. But whatever the case is.
Oh, I didn't catch that. That part of it. I thought the article was fine.
Thank you. No, it was written with love. I mean, I was trying to shed light on how anime is made in Japan, which a lot of people don't realize abroad is like very manga based. And the way manga are made is very editorial focused more than creator focused, and like especially at places like Shonen Jump magazine. So I wanted to talk about that, but you know, people kind of tend to read the headline and nothing else. So that's just how it goes. But yes, I do a lot of writing for the New Yorker. I do a lot of writing for other outlets. Hiroko's been starting to write for the New Yorker too. She did a big one on cleaning. Earlier this year, and you know, I've been working on we've been working on the Japanese translation of Pure Invention, which is coming out. The publisher translated it, but then we had to go through and like make sure everything was great. And that's
essentially just content was Japanese.
Yes, because now like this book came out and was a big hit in America, and so now like, you know, people in Japan are going to be looking at this as like, whoa, well, this is what Americans and Europeans, Brits are thinking about us. So we wanted to make sure everything was done right. And there was a really great translator who worked on that. So that was cool. So game localization is now like, it used to be 80% of what we do. And now it's probably more like 10. But you know, next year that could flip again. You know what I mean? If we get pulled into a big project or something like that.
It really depends.
It really depends.
Our job is really based project by project.
Yeah, it's project by project. So one of the great things about running your own company is that you can pursue projects that you personally find of interest. You're not really assigned to them. And localization has really transitioned from when we were getting started. It was very artisanal. It was very kind of handmade. Like you had all these like little weird operators, like whether they're freelance or little tiny companies. And now it's really consolidated into a bunch of big agencies in ways for better and for worse. I think one of the ways for better is that these agencies are able to bring a lot of technology to bear. And the ways they're worse is that I think if you're an actual translator, I think rates have really come down a lot. Like it's become a commodity, and it's really tough for translators, especially young ones, to kind of make a living at doing this. But that's just the kind of maturation of the localization industry. We were there at the very beginning, and now we're seeing these changes now, and it's been really interesting to be watching that.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Cool.
how's them apples? Is that
So
basically it?
since you've been at this for a few decades now, what tools do you use, and has anything changed drastically, or have some things stayed the same rather?
We basically just work in Excel files. I mean, if a client has a translation memory system, we'll work in that. I know Square Enix has its own internal localization memory system, translation memory tool that they use. We basically, a lot of the times when we're hired by client, they hire us now less because we're like a translation factory and more because we have some sort of specific background knowledge that makes us right for the product. Like when we did Neo, for instance.
Or Gundam.
Or Gundam games for Bandai. We have a lot of experience with those franchises, or in Neo's case, Hiroko and I wrote the book on yokai in English, literally. So that's why they came to us. And in those cases, there's much less reliance or need for translation tools, since we're the ones coming up with the glossaries in the first place. We're the ones coming up with the characterizations a lot of times. And so we'll mainly work in Excel files. That's traditionally how we've worked. Giant Excel files. But sometimes we will work in translation tools, memory tools. If a client has a specific one that they want us to use.
So rare to us.
But that's uncommon these days. I know a lot of translators use stuff like MemoQ and Trados, but we have not so far needed to use those things. Our clients have not asked us to use them, and so we stick with old school.
I'm just amazed that you've been able to tolerate Excel for that long.
Oh, it's horrific. Oh,
it's like I've never met an Excel user that actually likes it.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. And Jeremy Blaustein was really ahead of the curve with this. He came up with a translation memory tool with an engineer friend of his. I think I mentioned this early on, and it turned out that there were a lot of technical issues that prevented them from commercializing it. But I often wonder, there's a parallel universe where Jeremy came up with the world's first usable localization tool, and we're all living on Jeremy time.
Yeah, I remember that there was a cute robot icon on the top of the screen, and that was an output icon or something that, and they call it spit.
Yeah.
And it so we want to spit in it.
Yeah, you had to spit from the tool. You have to spit it back into an Excel file, because back then the clients were only working in Excel. So you'd have to, back then in like the early 2000s, a memory tool you'd have to input the Excel and then output in Excel. Actually, still today, that's how a lot of translation memory tools work. And by the way, translation memory tools are great. It's really awesome to have a dynamic glossary. It's really awesome to have like suggestions for like especially repetitive phrases for making sure everything's unified. But we tend to work on really quirky projects that don't have a lot of kind of generic repetitive text in them, or the repetitive generic text is being handled in-house, and they outsource the weird parts to us.
Yeah.
That's often. We're kind of called in as problem solvers on projects that have really niche or weird content in them, whether it's yokai or whether it's like super historic based ninja stuff, or whether like Gundam being another example of that, like because I grew up on that as a kid and I have a lot of kind of connection with that series. So we're not in the trenches so much anymore like we used to be 20 years ago, and that's a good thing. I mean, I don't really think anybody, it's kind of a young person's game, to be honest. It's like rock and roll.
So from someone who's also in the creative field, when you have so much work and you have so much text and you got deadlines looming over your head, I'm sure you have days where it's overwhelming. So what have you learned over the years to dodge burnout and writer's block? And even with if you have a really packed portfolio like like you two do you ever get that constant itch to revise and rewrite everything?
Burnout. We did, Hiroko and I have a rule that we never talk about work like at the dinner table, and we never talk about work in our private spaces.
Okay.
And we're really disciplined about working, like getting up, going to bed pretty early, fairly, and getting up at a reasonable hour, working 8 hours and then stopping. Like we never pull all-nighters. Even in the beginning, we never pulled all-nighters. You have to take care of yourself because clients won't take care of you. They're going to take and take and take because that's what they're just interested in what your output is.
Yes.
So,
even if they have the best intentions. Yes.
Yes. No, I mean, it's just, that's how it works. It's like, you are providing a service and they want as much service as they can get.
And also the work is just all result basis.
Yeah.
So if you have a promise with sleeping, whatever, the outcome is not that good.
Yes.
So just our highest priority is make sure that we're healthy.
Well, and also
healthy in a healthy mind.
One of the reasons I think we've survived in this so long is that Hiroko and I very early on got good at saying no. Like, no, that schedule is not reasonable. No, we can't do this. And if you want to find somebody else to do it, we understand. Like, no hard feelings. But the schedule you are proposing is not reasonable because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah, because of X, Y, Z.
Or, if you want the schedule to be done, we're going to have to charge this much more to hire this many more people or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. You have to advocate for yourself. And a lot of times clients want to be told something doesn't work because they don't know. They're not localization professionals.
Exactly.
They want to be told, the average a translator can get is through 5,000 emoji characters in a day. So if your game is 1 million characters, there's no way to get it translated in a month. There's physically no way to do that. Unless you hire 1 million people each doing one emoji.
Yeah, but the thing is but we have to unify the voice.
But then, the bottleneck then becomes who's going to read all of that? Who is going to edit all of that? Because an editor can only edit X amount of emoji in a day. You see what I'm saying? So like helping, transitioning out of just being in the trenches of a get it done, and more into the production side of things actually helped us get healthier because then we can advocate both for ourselves and the people we hired because a lot of times AltJapan would, make a team to do a project. So just advocate for yourself. Know what, you don't have to burn yourself out. Schedules should be reasonable.
Excellent advice.
Yes.
So you've worked on 2 iterations of Dragon Quest, both of them very different localization styles. Fans from both generations can be quite passionate. So how do you handle criticism, particularly when you've put so much work into it?
We don't really listen to it.
Good answer.
Because the projects are done. It's out of our hands.
Our client is the client.
Yeah.
It's not no matter how passionate a gamer is, they're not the ones paying us to make a living.
No, yeah. And also, we don't own the product.
Yes, and also that's the other thing. We don't own the product. We own in the sense that we worked on the localization, but a lot of criticisms out there, people are like, and I don't blame them for this. Consumers often don't realize the difference between a bad translation and something that's written badly to begin with and is difficult or is difficult to localize.
Yes.
There's a lot of not great writing out there and a lot of not great characterization in original Japanese games. And sometimes consumers mistake really deft localization for a genius original writing, like what the original was like in Japanese. And sometimes people mistake really clunky translations that are very faithful to what was really clunky in the original. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's very, first of all, we don't spend a lot of time in fan forums or watching over what fans say, not because we don't care about fans or think that their opinion isn't valuable, but
we're too busy for next project.
Well, A, we're busy on the next project, and B, it's not something that really concerns us because we're not the ones who, our dialogues are with the developers.
Right.
That's who we work for. That's who hires us. And so, it's important, I think, as a local, it's easy for localization professionals to get too invested in the projects they're working on. At the end of the day, it's not your brainchild. It's the brainchild of the producer and the director and the creative team. And this is not to disparage localization professionals because we're localization professionals. But having originated my own content and having localized content, I know instinctively what the differences and what the difficulties are that go into each one of those things. And it's important not to get overly invested either.
So basically, that's exactly why we started writing the Yokai Attack series.
Yes.
because we knew that the localization work is, we are just basically working for somebody else's contents. And then so for in order to keep our mental health, we wanted to create our own content. And then that's how we publish our own books.
Yeah, it really helped to have an outlet.
Yes, to balance. Yeah.
It did. It really helped to have our own creative outlet, because if somebody criticizes like our books, if somebody criticizes Pure Invention, I do take that personally. That's because that's something I wrote, and that's something that's my name is on it, as on the cover.
Yeah, it's like, I will fight you.
Exactly. Well, it's not even that I want to. I actually really appreciate criticism. I appreciate constructive criticism.
So that
exactly.
so that we can the work make it make things better.
Yes, but quite often like fan criticisms of localizations are not based in the objective reality of how localization is done or what localization is. So we tend not to get involved in that kind of thing.
No.
I think it's something like when Dragon Quest IV came out, because Dragon Quest IV, when it was Dragon Warrior IV, it has a special place in a lot of fans' hearts. And when the DS version of 4 came out, was very, very different. It's not, and I think sometimes fans don't always vocalize that just because it's different, they might not like a localization choice. That doesn't necessarily mean the writing is bad. But I see both sides. Just like some people love the new accents in 4, and some people prefer the old style that introduced them to RPGs and all that. So
sure.
Yeah. It's like I see both sides. Both sides have their points. So
definitely. Well, I mean, I'm not here to disparage anybody's feelings. If somebody feels like they like a localization, like one style of doing it better than another, that's a complete personal preference. But a lot of times our hands are tied. The director says they want to go this way. The head of localization wants to go that way. We are there to serve the people who make the game.
Yes.
That is who our in the end our responsibility is to. So, if people have problems, they should bring it up to the publisher. They should bring it up to the people actually who have the decision-making authority, the creative decision-making authority, because the localizers are often the easiest targets of Scorn and things like that, because they're foreign people, and and if you're a foreign critic, you can probably find them more easily. You can communicate with them more easily, or think you can communicate with them more easily. So it's like, we're kind of the first line, of defense, because I'm not defending these titles, but we're often loc professionals are often the first to take heat when people don't like something about a game. Period.
And you actually answered the other question I had. So Liam, it's all you.
All right. All right. Moving on to talk a little bit more about AltJapan. So you're a small business with a very successful one at that. 18 years and counting with numerous clients and credits. Have you achieved the goals you originally sought out when you were creating the company?
Well, the goal was to let us do whatever we wanted to do. So we didn't found AltJapan as like a specific. It was a localization company, but that's because localization was paying the bills at the time. Founding a company is a platform to allow you to explore different business
and
models.
then tax.
And also for tax, just for tax purposes, there's all sorts of kind of logistical things involved there too, for paying yourself and for expensing things and being able to hire people.
And then also it's a credit credential.
It's a credential. Yeah. So yes, I think the answer is yes. It's let us do what we wanted to do. And we've deliberately kept AltJapan kind of small and boutique because, when a company gets, I don't think there's any way to really scale localization and automate it.
Yeah, at the beginning, of course, it's just like everybody else, we constantly questions ourselves. There are, because there are so many definitions of what the big company is. Is it big assets? Does that make the big company? Or a large number of employees? Did that make a big company? Or making a big profit? Is that a big company? And we constantly question ourselves, and then eventually we decided to keep the company small, basically, 2 of us.
Agile.
Exactly. So that we can evolve.
Yes, and it's let us let us go through so many iterations. Because
it's a fact that we knew that because we are just only 2 people, so we can't head to the agency. So that means we cannot against say the price, for example. Now then they are like a dollar shop everywhere. And then, it's like, okay, but if even if it's even if you have a $1 shop is successful, but then 99 cents shop comes out, that kind of thing. That's a losing game. So we basically we constantly question ourselves and read it out, and then what would make us to get close to what the big company is. And then also the size is small.
Now, how can we offer quality? How can we offer, services? And that's what we came up with.
And then, to pick and choose, and then the big titles.
I imagine it's also good to be able to kind of keep your name attached to something. Like for example, if you work for Treehouse, you're working on Mario and Zelda, but your name just kind of gets faded into this giant staff. But
sure. Well, I mean, it depends on the company too. Nintendo is people like to think of Nintendo as a very cutting edge company, and they are a tech company, but they're a very traditional company. That's like a salaryman culture there. It always has been, always will be. It's a very Kyoto kind of culture, and that's just how it is. Other companies are more scrappy, especially if you're talking like indies and like startups and things like that. I mean, Nintendo's been in business for what, like 100 and how many years? 130?
A little while.
Yeah. So it's like, it's a traditional, like you go in there, like you become Nintendo. You become part of Nintendo. It's not like that's a place for you to shine as an individual. If you want to shine as an individual, you go somewhere else. I mean, there's pluses and minuses to every situation. You have to choose what you do for yourself.
Right. So if someone was interested in getting into translation, localization, and whatnot, what advice would you give? What's something that you wish you would have known when you were starting out?
God, the field has changed so much. I mean, I would advise anybody getting into game localization to also keep in mind that those same skills can work in fields that are not necessarily game related, but a lot easier to get work in and probably pay higher too. There's no shame to doing patent translation or doing technical translation, or you don't have to, yoke your faked games. You can leave game localization and you can come back to it. Like there's no game localization police who are going to bar your entry back in. Don't be shocked if your progress is not a straight line. If it's 2 steps forward and 1 back. It's just how it goes.
It's good to know.
Yeah. Why are you getting into localization?
I'm busy enough as it is. I'm one of those people. I don't get to play games anymore. So I just get to work, and then I get to clean the house, and then I get to wake up and work some more, then clean the house again.
Well, on that note, Hiroko and I actually have to get back to work. So
oh, do you? Oh, okay.
Yes, we're gonna actually have to run, but because it's been an hour and a half.
Oh. Okay, well, we had a bunch of questions on your attack series, and
geez, can we do a follow-up?
Seriously, you can, if you like sometime, you're more than welcome to come back and talk about all this great stuff. I know. I want to.
No. Actually, I'll tell you what. You convinced me. What questions do you have if you want to go down the list?
All right. Okay. Oh shoot, lost my place. Liam, if you wanted to go first, or would you like to talk about the attack books and pure invention and having your robot collection on display at the Kennedy Center?
Geez. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Why don't we focus on?
You've done so much, books. So it's hard. It's hard to narrow just one thing.
What would you like to know about the attack series?
Oh goodness,
so much.
I mean, really, just how you decided to write your own books, and just like your love of monsters, ghosts, outlaws, the culture, and just everything that went into it.
Hiroko's love of yokai.
I always wanted to do yokai because all the Japanese products, let's say cars, manga, and game software, toys, any sushi, and concept of geisha. I mean, all the Japanese stuff and came out Japan to abroad. But yokai,
it was kind of untapped.
Yeah, at the time. But the yokai was a very popular subject in Japan. I mean, of course, the depth of knowledge varies by people. But if you talk to kids or talk to old people, whatever, but everybody knows what yokai is. So, and it's fun. So I wanted to introduce the yokai, Japanese yokai, to abroad.
Yeah, and like I love Japanese monsters, but like I was more into like Godzilla. you know, and Hiroko's like, well, if you like Godzilla and stuff like that, there's this whole other world, genre world of traditional Japanese monsters called yokai. And she was really my guide into that. And she and I were just, you know, this is years back, like right after we first moved to Japan, like 2003, because then we could go to like art exhibitions and, you know, there's much more books on that here. And we would look over these beautiful art books. And I remember saying to her, I'm like, God, we should try to do a guidebook in English. And we were introduced through a mutual friend to somebody at Kodansha International. And one thing led to another. We got a, you know, our proposal went through and the book did really well for them. And so, you know, they greenlit a sequel and then another sequel.
So we wanted to make something fun, but at the same time, we wanted to, we call it edutainment, the education plus entertainment.
Right.
So that's what basically your Attack series is all about. It's fun to read, but in the end, you learn something about Japanese culture and history.
No, it's basically it. It's just, and I'm pretty sure Yokai Attack was the first English language guidebook on that topic. Yes. And nice. We were really happy to hear
the word yokai.
That people after that book came out, like people started citing it in like development teams and stuff. Like, oh, we can just call this character a yokai. And
before that, the whole bunch of the translations out there, just monsters, ghouls.
Well, Richard actually features into this. Because Richard was working at level 5, and I remember Richard telling me that when they're developing Yokai Watch, there was a big discussion.
That's right.
There was a big discussion in the company, what the hell are we going to call this game? And then Yokai Attack came up, like, well, there's a book with this in English. Oh, okay, we can call it Yokai. They ended up putting a hyphen in it, I think, to kind of make it, to differentiate it, make it their own. But actually, right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm looking at on the wall, there's a letter and an illustration from the director of Yokai Watch, you know, who thanking us for, I guess Richard had given him a copy of the book or something like that. And he gave us a copy of the game. But
that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like, we made the books to kind of help Japanese people and Western people, you know, use it as a reference. Because we didn't make up anything in Yokai Attack. It's all based on research, like, or what conventional wisdom is about all of these different yokai monsters. And, you know, we carried that through to Ninja Attack. We carried it through to Yurei Attack, which is the Japanese ghost survival guide. So those books are intended as kind of guides, reference guides for anybody who wants to.
So, but when we wrote it, obviously that our target, in our mind, our target audience is, you know, is adult, you know, high teenagers and older. But when the book's published, Yokai Attack got published, for some reason, just children,
kids loved it. We got so many letters from like mothers and fathers saying
thanking us. It's like, oh my gosh, my daughter has never read a book, but then finally she started, you know, reading your book.
Yeah, and I'm like, God, I'm like, is this okay? There's like monsters ripping people limb from limb. These rip fairy tales are pretty rough too. So
kids love that book.
Kids love that book.
I love that, and it's had such a long life to it too, because because ever since it's come out, I've constantly seen it pop up here and there, just like somebody's reading it. I see it on someone's bookshelf.
Yeah.
That Yokai Attack published in 2008.
It's been in print for almost 15 years now. So it's going on. I've no signs of going out. I mean, Tuttle, after Kodansha International went out of business, Tuttle picked it up, and it's just been been fun.
Just upgraded.
Actually, there's a new updated version of Yokai Attack that features Amabie, the yokai who rose to fame during the COVID-19 epidemic.
Okay.
We kind of put in there. So there's a new edition of Yokai Attack that should be pretty widely available in the next few months. There's still some older editions as it's selling out.
It's always great to see a project that is clearly a labor of love become a huge hit and be embraced by so many people. That's why creative folks like us do what we do.
Yes, no, I mean, it's all about, you know, kind of trying to affect the dialogue, trying to affect the conversation. It is, of course, everybody wants to have a massive hit, you know, so you can retire to your like castle, you know. Everybody wants an empire like Marie Kondo or something, but you know, we are the life-changing magic of Japanese monsters. We're just really happy to see it become a kind of de facto standard reference
But then we moved. We raised our bar,
Yeah.
and then that was 2016.
Japan
To
Demonium.
Pandemonium Illustrated.
Yeah, so we translated, like, we found these like 1770s vintage yokai encyclopedias. Like, they're very widely known among folklorists in Japan, but they're not really well known abroad. And we found beautiful copies of them in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and licensed them and found a publisher and published a translation of these guidebooks that are basically the foundation for how everybody in Japan sees yokai today. And that book was published under the title Japan Demonium Illustrated, the Yokai Encyclopedias of Toriyama Sekien. And it came out 2016 from Dover.
Yeah, Dover.
And that's the only, that was tough. That's like translating 17. So that was, we kind of brought our localization skills to bear on this pop culture from the 1700s. That was our modus operandi there.
Yeah, so the first Matt said that, we should translate into English, and I knew, what kind of, it was first I thought that was the craziest idea, because I'm like, well, I know how much English got changed, but Japanese got changed so much.
Yeah, it's almost a different language. And also all the references, like, it made me realize translating that, because like it was written for like a really witty and sophisticated Edo, as Tokyo was known back then, audience. And it made me realize 200 years from now, people are going to look back on Twitter and like Reddit and not have a clue what we're talking about, because we're referencing some like headline, or we're referencing some kind of meme that's been long forgotten. Because Japan Demonium Illustrated is basically a book of memes, like Edo era memes, stuff that cracked people up in Tokyo, Edo in 1780 is basically what it is. Like, and if you said any of these stories to anybody on the street in Edo back then, they'd know that you were probably referring to X, Y, and Z. But like, we really had that was the tough part about that.
That was our legacy.
Okay, what are they really talking about here? It's obviously, not like, often the surface level was just the surface, and like it was referencing something completely different beneath that. So yeah, that was a lot of fun to do. And tough, but fun.
But it was fun.
But satisfying.
Awesome.
Satisfying.
Excellent.
Well, is there anything else that you're working on now that you'd like to promote?
Well, there's Pure Invention, the Pure Invention, how Japan made the modern world, which is all about how it's basically, like I said, a history of our weird times told through the lens of Japanese pop culture. Because so many of the trends and things that we take for granted today actually have their roots in Japan, post-war Japan, like, and post-bubble Japan, like the way that we are all immersed in like portable devices that let us shut out the world. Like, Japan invented that with the Walkman. The way we all think that we're the center of entertainment, center of the world on Instagram. Well, like the karaoke machine was the first machine that let everybody think that they were the, a star for a moment. User-generated content and all of that. All of these things that are such a fabric of modern life today, like the tools and the groundwork for them was laid in Japan, and a lot of people don't realize that. So I wanted to write a book that was kind of where I was doing this. It's a detective story. I'm actually tracking down the very first karaoke machine, the very first Hello Kitty product, the very first post-war toy, the very first, I interviewed Masayuki Uemura, the engineer who made the Famicom. Like, I tracked him down and we had a really fun conversation in Kyoto. So it's a kind of cultural detective story, telling the stories of a lot of these products that changed your life, but maybe you didn't know how they came to be. So it's Pure Invention, available at finer bookstores everywhere. So that's it.
Awesome.
That's the pitch.
Okay. All right. Dwaine,
thanks for having us. We really appreciated this. I'm sorry we couldn't talk longer, but duty calls.
Well, if you want to come back and just have fun and just talk about localization stuff, or just talk about your interest in things that you enjoy, I think Liam would love to have you back anytime.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, let's make it happen sometime.
That's it for this episode of Slime Time. We do want to thank Matt and Hiroko for joining,
and thank you everyone who's tuning in and listening to this. This was something that I think we've wanted to do for a while, and it was definitely a blast.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So we don't use Patreon. We're just longtime fans who want to speak about the game series we know and love. If you have money you'd like to donate, consider sliding on over to the Dragon's Den and click on support this site. Woodus has owned and maintained the Dragon's Den DQ fan site for over 20 years and would appreciate any donation, or you can use his Amazon affiliate links to make any purchases, and a small fraction of the sale will go to support the Dragon's Den. For any questions or comments or to advertise with us, please reach out at slimetimepodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions or comments for us, you can also find us on Twitter or Instagram at DQ Slimetime. Specifically, the Instagram, I post a lot of photos from my time in Japan. So go check that out. It's you'll see some photos you won't see anywhere on the Twitter account. Consider joining in tons of Dragon Quest discussions on the Dragon's Den forums, one of the last remaining DQ forums still around. You can find it at woodus.com/forums. Come hang out with us and tons of other rabid Dragon Quest fans at the Dragon's Den Discord server. We'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible, including Woodus for his support of the series and this podcast and keeping the Dragon's Den lights on for decades.
Thanks very much to Amanda Lepre from the Descendants of Erdrick for allowing us to use their music for our podcast. The Descendants of Erdrick is a video game tribute band from Austin, Texas, just 2.5 hours away from me. Check them and their most recent album Advent at descendantsoferdrick.com or on Twitter at @DofErdrick, and check out Amanda Lepre on Twitch. And the most important thing, of course, thanks very much to me for my amazing artwork for this cover for the podcast. You can check out more of my artwork on Instagram at Dwaine Art. That's DWAINEART. I'm cursed with a name nobody can spell. Or you can check out my temporary website at DwaineBullockArt.BigCartel.com. If you're looking for more Dragon Quest Slime Time, check out our earlier episodes on the Dragon's Den, Anchor FM, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and even more.
Bye, everyone. Dragon Quest Slime Time, sliming off.